As I speak these words, it is Monday, January 13th, and Sonali has perhaps a closer perspective on the story of the day than anyone in this world would want. Sonali lives in Altadena, which is perhaps the community most devastated by the Eaton fire, which is also worked at North Pasadena and some other places. So she is not only reporting on this fire, she and her community are living with it on a daily basis. So it was very kind of her to take some time out of that to speak with us. So first of all, Sonali, welcome back, and we hope you're hanging in there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. I'm just on the outskirts of Altadena in North Pasadena, but I consider myself an honorary Altadenan. I go there all the time. I celebrated a milestone birthday last week, and the bakery that my husband ordered my cake from is in the heart of Altadena. And today, on Monday, it was the sign that said Nancy's Bakery, along with a whole bunch of other institutions, was on the front page of the New York Times. That sign bent over, soot
Hmm.
covered. It feels, yes, I've had a week. Let's put it that way. I've had a week along with my community, and I'm one of the lucky ones because my house is still standing.
Oh, yeah, and I know a little bit about what you're going through because I worked in lower Manhattan until about 60 days before the September 11th
Mhm.
attack. And so the community that I knew was devastated, destroyed, the kinds of things that you see in footage from other parts of the world. You're now seeing where you went every day, where you spent your time. You know, I had a pass to World Trade Center too. So it gives one a different perspective, doesn't it, about the kind of existence we impose on others as a nation here in the United States without even thinking twice about it. I mean, that's one of the thoughts that's gone through my mind. Has anything like that occurred to you as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered so many disasters, man-made, natural, climate change fueled in my journalistic career, and it feels very surreal to be in the midst of one that the world is, looking at, that none of us ever expected to be in the crosshairs of international coverage or, nuclear level, supercharged fires. And looking at some of the sites where houses once stood that are
Mm.
now covered with burning embers, I couldn't help but think of Gaza. This is what the last time I saw scenes like this in photos were pictures of Israeli bomb sites in Gaza. And the only silver lining to all of this is that the death toll could have been a lot higher at the Eaton fire than it was. So far, 24 people have been killed, confirmed killed from the all the fires in Southern California, but 16 out of those 24, so a majority, were from the Eaton fire near where I live, because that fire came down so fast. And Richard, if you want, I can give you a sense of how that fire came down and why it came down and why we need to talk about climate change, if you'll
Oh, yeah, please.
indulge me. So basically, what has happened is, Southern California has been in a drought for many years. And then a couple of years ago, we got rain and then more rain and then so much rain that in 18 months we had record-breaking rain. And of course, people got excited because we thought, yay, the drought is over. And what that did, of course, was it encouraged enormous amounts of green growth in the mountains. Then we had 7 months of no rain whatsoever, like a fraction of a percent of the rain that we normally get. January, February is our rainy season. We have had no rain. So you have all of that brush that grew that turned dry as a bone. Our humidity levels are near 0%. And our normal weather patterns include these seasonal Santa Ana winds that come around this time of year, except now they're a lot stronger than they've ever been. The last time they were this strong was in 2011, when I remember we had a huge storm, but back then we didn't have the added effect of drought followed by high rainfall followed by drought again. We also didn't have such low humidities. So all the conditions were ripe. Majority of these are conditions that are directly a result of climate change. So you had this fire, any kind, and it doesn't matter what the start, how the fire starts, right? People are like, who started the fire? How did the fire start? You can't eradicate fire. Fire is natural in forests. Fire is a fact of our life. We have lived with fire. However, when you then have a fire that's supercharged by climate-driven winds, you're going to get a moving firestorm, a raging inferno that went unnaturally down the mountain, not up the mountain as fire normally does. It was pushed down the mountain by 80, 100, 120 miles an hour winds miles into the city, right? Miles into areas that are not considered prone to fire, and embers, burning little firebombs, flaming firebombs, driven by the wind, hitting dried trees, trees catching on fire, dropping embers onto homes, on this side, but sparing homes on that side, homes catching on fire, bursting into flame. Those fires then fanned by the wind that kept whipping and whipping and whipping, and fire trucks completely outgunned, having no idea. Normally one fire of one house requires two or three fire trucks with 500-gallon truck water tanks to put out. They ran out of water like this, but frankly, no matter how much water they had, they would not have been able to control the wind whipped fires. So we've had so this happened from Tuesday morning. It started, the fires started, the wind started Tuesday morning, the fire started Tuesday night. By late Tuesday night, it was an inferno. By Wednesday morning, Altadena was wiped out. And we are picking up the pieces, and it is, just shocking to me. People, houses on my family daily walk have been burnt down. Houses on the other side have been burned down. To the north, they've barricaded it. We have National Guard in here. And so what blows my mind is that we have these conditions that are ripe for climate change, from climate change. And we've had this destruction, and people are saying, who started the fire? Why wasn't there enough water? None of that matters. Why did people live in a fireproof zone? Why weren't our houses more resilient? None of that matters. Climate change will devastate and outrun all of us. It doesn't matter where I move. It doesn't matter how resilient I make my home. It doesn't matter how much water the fire trucks had. It doesn't matter how much you try to keep fire away. With climate change and the way in which it's destroying our atmosphere and our climate, none of us are safe. And if I survived, my house survived this time, it may not survive next year or the year after that unless we do something about climate change.
And Sonali, we've both been covering climate and climate politics for a long time. And many years ago, people were saying the A, B, C, and D are going to happen if we don't do something about climate change. And people treated it as if it was someday. Or maybe it would happen someday. Someday is here, isn't it? And I think that people are not making the connection that all of this, or most of it, maybe not the particulars, was predicted. Wildfires out of control, homes being threatened in urban areas, just one example, floods and other examples. We could name the many different factors, but, I think it goes back to what we experienced, those of us who lived through 9/11 in one way or another, the sense of mistaken impunity that a lot of people in the West have. Well, it's not going to be me. Well, it is going to be you. Isn't that one of the lessons of this?
Exactly. That is precisely it, right? Like the rich will be impacted, but they'll always be able to rebuild better and faster than us. So they think they're immune. They're not. However, they're going to have more resources at their disposal to rebuild and just up and leave. Eventually, it'll catch up to them too, because you can't undo the loss of life. You can undo the loss of property, no matter how much money you have. And then the poor, the rest of us, we're going to lose our lives. We're going to lose the things that we hold dear, our communities, our networks, and rebuilding that. We're not going to have the resources to do that. Right now, people are like raising money for their immediate needs through GoFundMe. People in my neighborhood, my husband and I have donated like more money than we probably have to our friends because we want to help them because survivor's guilt, is setting in.
Mm.
And people are counting on each other on our networks because we feel unmoored. We're not sure if the insurance companies are going to pay out. We're not sure if FEMA under Trump especially is going to pay out and help us rebuild. And so we're relying on our already stretched resources. Nowhere is safe. Nobody is immune. But the already vulnerable are going to be disproportionately impacted, and the rich who feel that they can outrun this are not going to be able to. And I don't know who they think they are in continuing to allow our climate to be so devastated that they think they can hold themselves up and escape this apocalypse. They can't. And by the time they realize that, it might be too late for all of us.
And in the meantime, among the other disasters, inequality gets exacerbated. I worry that
Exactly.
parts of Los Angeles will become like New Orleans after Katrina. I've loved the city of New Orleans for many, many years, but when they rebuilt with an eye to tourism and upscaling portions of the city. And I'm afraid we're already seeing in Los Angeles that rents have skyrocketed, housing costs in certain areas. I've been reading the Los Angeles Times on that and other places. So it seems to me Manhattan is already like a game preserve for wealthy, financial types. It used to be a very diverse place to live and work. And I'm afraid that that will happen to California too. But as you say, in the end, it can't be outrun. And yet people, I mean, let's just talk for a second, if you don't mind, Sonali,
Yeah.
about connecting the dots here, because we talk about well, how did climate change bring something like this about? And we may, you and I remember when they stopped calling it global warming because climate change is a more descriptive term. Climate instability, perhaps even more descriptive, right? So maybe we could just spend a minute and talk about, were the Santa Ana winds more ferocious because of climate change? Was the flood drought pattern more extreme and so on? Do we know any?
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
absolutely was. There's zero doubt about that. I've lived here for 26 years, and I remember January, February was the rainy season. And then about 8 to 9 years ago, that started getting less and less true. In the last 5 years or so, we've had like almost a complete drought. We then like 2 years ago, suddenly we started getting rain, and then we got so much of it. There was so much rain, and we almost flooded. But people were happy. Oh, we got our water reserves filled up, and it kind of fills you with this false sense of security that, oh, maybe we're not in a drought. Maybe climate change won't be that bad. And then extreme drought. And yes, absolutely, the Santa Ana chains winds were fueled by climate change. I've been following now. I wish I'd actually discovered him sooner, but there's a young climate scientist who's been credited with saving hundreds of lives, who's based in Eaton Canyon. I'm trying to reach him for an interview. His
Hmm.
name is Edgar McGregor, and he's like a born and raised in Pasadena, Altadena area, works and lives near Eaton Canyon, and has a large social media following because he videotapes his trash pickups at Eaton Canyon. And he has a hyper local weather alert on Patreon that he gives for people who live in the Altadena Pasadena area because he's a climate scientist. He's a graduate of San Jose State University. So he knows how to read, weather reports and understand these weather patterns. And on Monday, the 6th of January, the day before the storms broke out, he filmed a video of himself on the top of Eaton Canyon picking up trash with the wind starting to, slowly whip up. And he's talked about what he was expecting to happen.
Hmm.
And he said he predicted it. He said this could go nuclear. This could be the most crazy, out of control fire. All the conditions are ripe. When we had the 2011 fire, we didn't have these same conditions. The winds are going to be much stronger as predicted. On Tuesday evening, he sent out an alert to his Patreon subscribers, just a few hundred people in that area who, have just been relying on him for local weather reports. He basically said, grab your things and get out. And hundreds of cars started streaming out of Altadena, reportedly, there are people now who are saying, I'm alive thanks to this kid.
Wow.
And the alerts didn't go out from the authorities because it caught them off guard. They were issuing wind advisories, but they didn't realize the conflagration that was coming at stunning speed right into people's homes. And had Edgar not warned these folks, many of them might not have even known to get out in time. I mean, that's terrifying. So they literally like ran out with the clothes on their back. So yes, climate change is absolutely 100% behind this. It is, we would not have had such destruction. We might have had a fire, and we might have had some wind damage, but we would not have had the extent of that. Altadena would not have been wiped out if it weren't for climate change. There's no doubt about that.
And so there are two things it seems to me, but you let me know your thoughts. It seems to me there are two things we should be doing immediately. One, above all, mitigate climate change because and demand that because it's Altadena today. It's your city here tomorrow, right? I mean, it's going to spread. It's going to get worse. And the other is to just integrate our thinking about how all this snaps together, works together. You know, what your guy, this climate scientist you described, what he did was he used systems thinking. He integrated, all the factors that are going on. We don't do that. We don't do that with the climate. We don't do that with the ecology. We don't do it with the way the ecology intersects with economics, demographics, geography, all these things. So we really need to start. What was the old adage? Think globally, act locally. Think
Yep.
globally and locally. I mean, recognize it's one big thing, and that I'm so sorry for we have some friends in Altadena. I'm so sorry for what you've gone through, and especially what the people who've lost their homes have gone through. It's terrible, but if we don't learn from it, that this is an organic whole that we're
Exactly.
you know
That's exactly right. And this is my big frustration because even people who are here, even people who know better, who are not climate deniers, they're not saying those words yet. And I think it's because we have this cultural fear that has been built in because of the climate deniers, because of the Trumpers, because of the MAGA people. Um, because you can't say with there's the sense that climate change denialism is now like part of our lives. Many of us have sort of capitulated to that pressure, and we feel that if we start talking about climate change, we're going to be dismissed as crazy conspiracy theorists or radical leftists who have an agenda. And how should it be? And yet, if you look at polls, a majority of Americans understand that climate change is real, accept that it is real, and want the government to do something about it. But we're scared to talk about it. And this is what's blowing my mind. It's reminding me of what you see in the wake of mass shootings when survivors of mass shootings start talking about gun control and they get beaten back by right-wing politicians who say, you're trying to politicize the tragedy. What? If we had gun control, there would be no tragedy. How is that a
right.
politicization? Not talking about it is a politicization. Not talking about climate change
Exactly.
politicizes the situation that we're in today and ensures that there will be more Eaton fires and more Palisades fires. And I don't know if my house will survive the next fire, right? There's
Right.
only so much that I can do as an individual. I've had drought tolerant plants for years. I've had a gray water system. I have solar panels on my roof. We do like water conservation in my house. I grow fruit trees. How much more I can harden my home, and then what? The next fires that come, am I just supposed to be glad that, oh, maybe I survived this one and all my neighbors' houses burnt down, and then 3 fires later mine is down too? I mean, it's a zero sum. It's a losing proposition. We are all losers in a future that we don't talk about climate change and do something about it.
Absolutely. And the only thing I want to add to that is, when people go looking for, well, who started these fires?
Who cares?
If your whole system, if your civilization can be destroyed by some jerk with a box of matches,
Exactly.
then then it's not the jerks. The jerk isn't the problem. There'll always be jerks. The problem is your system can be burned down with a match.
Exactly. And that's a really good way of putting it. People want to know who started the fire, what's wrong with these people, the arsonists. And it's true that, we do have to be careful in dry areas that are traditionally dry.
Sure.
We need to work with indigenous communities who do controlled burns, who know how to work with controlled fire and fire control for generations. But all of that is separate from the added layer of climate change. And it's not to say that we don't have big fires in the past pre-climate change that people don't die in, but we're just gonna keep having more and more of these. It's just the likelihood of us being impacted is skyrocketing, skyrocketing.
Well, again, I'm so sorry you've had to go through this, and my heart goes out to the people I know and people I don't know who are struggling through all of this. And I only hope we can broaden our vision to include everything that's making this take place right now. Your perspective is very valuable in doing those. So, as always, Sonali, thanks for thinking about this, and as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate you. I'll see you next week.
We depend on your support here at the Zero Hour, so please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.